So to see everything go to like a total 180, and now I represent on city council as the first Asian American, and I found out I'm the first Korean female in the state of Texas to be on any city council.
Oh, wow.
That's
wow.
crazy.
That is absolutely full circle right there.
When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 36 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snellings Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. Today, I'd like to welcome Tammy Meinershagen to the studio with me. Tammy is the Chief Innovation Officer and Managing Partner at Blackshaw Partners. She has 10 plus years of experience in branding, marketing, communications, and public relations, and she currently oversees all business operations and strategies nationally and internationally that expand the Blackshaw Partners brand. Tammy is also the first Asian American to serve on the Frisco City Council and was named the Spirit of Frisco by the Frisco Chamber of Commerce. She loves the arts and is a professionally trained musician and has had creative works featured in the Wall Street Journal, the Dallas Morning News, WFAA, and multiple Frisco media outlets. Tammy, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that is quite the resume. And I had to cut out quite a bit of it too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
Yeah. So I first met you when I was in Leadership Frisco, class 25, and we all know that's the best class ever.
Right, I was just waiting for that.
Yeah, exactly, right? And you actually played for us.
Okay, yeah, that's right. That was the year that was in the NAC Theater.
Yeah, the NAC Theater, that's right.
Yeah.
So what is your background in, was it violin or was
yes,
it? Okay.
Violin. So that's an interesting question. It's actually one of the first instruments that I played, and actually really is the reason that I'm still an advocate for the arts, because I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, back in the 1970s. So with a Korean immigrant family in the middle of a Swedish town, I mean, it was not easy.
I would imagine so.
It was very different from what we have now. Like, we live in an international city in Frisco. But even back at that time, it was a tough place for me to grow up. And I didn't even speak the language because my parents were immigrants. So my language was music. And I saw a violin. My parents had taken me to a concert, a free concert from the Chicago Symphony. And that's the only reason we could go. And I saw these violins and I'm like, I want to play this instrument. So my parents said, you know what? I think this is what we'll let her do. I started playing, and that was how I was able to communicate with friends at school. I should not even say friends, people at school that then became my friends because of the music, because I didn't really speak the language. Wow. So violin is really very meaningful to me. It was my first voice.
That is so interesting. You know, our very last episode, we had Tony Kurtelin on.
Yes, of course, Tony.
He was an immigrant as well, and basically just had to be immersed in the language, but didn't speak it when he first came here. Right.
So, and this is before ESL classes. This is before you had any sort of assistance for kids that don't speak that language. So it was a different time. I'm glad that we have those resources now for kids, but it wasn't back then.
And so, I guess, what is your first memory of that? And were you just basically thrown into classes?
Yeah,
and had to figure it out?
I distinctly remember walking into the classroom and scared because I have no idea even why I'm there. Like, the concept of school didn't make sense because I wasn't.
How old are you?
I'm 5. I'm going to kindergarten.
All right.
And I have no idea why I'm even coming. So I'm freaking out and I'm crying, and I see people I don't recognize. I hear people I don't understand. And I still remember the teacher kind of looking at me and saying something, and she was upset because I wasn't doing whatever she was asking me to do. And I didn't even know what to do, and everyone's staring at me, and I just broke down in tears again, and I had to go home because I would only just cry. I didn't know what else to do. So I remember that very, very distinctly. And that's part of what informed me just as an adult, as I had my kids, wanting to make sure that in the schools that no one would ever feel that. that we would have an inclusive environment. We'd have a very welcoming environment, especially for our international community in Frisco.
Wow, it's amazing to think like how much things have changed
Yes.
from the time that you were thrown into that environment to now where we do have all of these different resources.
Oh, I know. And I mean, now school is different. The culture is different. Even South Korean culture was not well known back in the 70s. People didn't even know the country of South Korea. Everyone would say, "Oh, are you Chinese or Japanese?" I'm like, "I'm neither. I'm South Korean." Now you can't get away from South Korean culture. I mean, we're dominating music.
Yeah.
Yes, there's
K-pop.
music. Exactly. Like and movies. I mean, getting Oscars for films that are spoken in Korean. It's actually mind-blowing. My parents, every time they see something like that where the culture is elevated, they just burst into tears because they're so proud, and it feels rewarding to be like, okay, we finally feel seen in this environment, in this culture now. So yeah, I mean, it was a different time, but now I'm so thankful that it's not like that. I mean, I'm proud to be South Korean.
Well, and so let me go back to that first day at fifth grade. Like, walk us
Kindergarten.
through. I'm sorry. Yes, kindergarten. Sorry, you were 5.
By fifth grade, I knew how to speak English.
Right. Well, so what was that journey like? How did you learn? Did you
Yeah.
have a tutor, or did you just have to figure it out?
Yeah, you just figure it out. And that's how all the kids did. Anyone that was an immigrant, you just had to figure it out. And for me, like I said, I didn't feel a sense of connection with people because I didn't have any friends that were in the school. Now, we had a small Korean community in Rockford, Illinois that my parents were very actively involved in because my dad was an elder at the church and my mom was the choir director. So we had a community, but we all spoke Korean. So it was an isolated community, but that was there. It was just, I couldn't integrate into American culture. And so I tried, and then I did go through kind of a personal struggle where I was angry that I was Korean. I really hated my culture, and I hated what I call my wrapping, because on the inside I started to feel not as Korean as I did American. I was, eating regular foods. I mean, I was behaving and learning the culture, but I didn't look it, and so I would still get that resistance from people thinking that I wasn't fully American. So that was a real internal struggle, and I pushed the Korean culture away as far as I could. When I went to college at Northwestern, I was like, I'm not going to have any Korean friends. I don't want to be a part of any Korean community events. I mean, I really tried. My mom says, that's probably why you didn't marry Korean, is because you didn't even want to procreate more Korean children. Like, probably in the back of my mind, I thought that. So to see everything go to like a total 180, and now I represent on city council as the first Asian American, and I found out I'm the first Korean female in the state of Texas to be on any city council.
Oh, wow.
That's
wow.
crazy.
That is
that's me.
absolutely full circle right there.
Yeah. And I mean, it's hard to believe how life works, because it was the thing that I hated the most about myself is now the thing that I celebrate, and it's meaningful to other people. And in fact, I leave for South Korea in a couple weeks because I was invited to a forum there for political leaders that are South Korean around the world. So
Wow.
Incredible. And I haven't been back to the country since 1986.
Wow. So this will definitely be a welcome homecoming for sure.
Yes, and I there's going to be an ugly cry for sure, because I mean it's very meaningful for me. Yeah.
So you carried this resentment really for your native culture.
Yeah.
All the way through high school and into college.
I would say all the way through till I had my firstborn. Because once Ellie was born and then she went to kindergarten for the first time, the school was wonderful. I mean, the school systems in Frisco are incredible. And they would ask me, what do you think about sharing your culture with the classroom? I'm like, absolutely not. Nobody needs to know. Nobody, I said no. And Ellie said to me, and she's a little 5-year-old, so same age as I was, entering a classroom where I felt very out of place. She said, Mom, I want to do it. I want to bring my hanbok, which is the traditional outfit. And I want everybody to know about the Korean culture. And I thought, oh my gosh, the problem is not the Korean culture. The problem is me. And I need to accept myself and my culture, because if I reject myself and my culture, then part of me is also rejecting my own daughter. who is half of me. So I had to really come to terms with, okay, I can't do this anymore. And I need to start opening up myself to embracing how I was created and also embracing my daughter fully and everybody else who has come to the States. And that's when I started actually a program in the schools called the Multicultural Minute, which is still there today. And I have nothing to do with it, which is so fun that it's in like 11 different schools now. But essentially it's a morning assembly bit where one of the kids that doesn't speak English as their first language will come up on stage. They'll be dressed in their traditional clothing. They'll teach everybody in the school how to say hello and goodbye and count to 10. And then on the bulletin board out on the hallway, we would have a map of the world, a little pinpoint on where they're from, family photo. And it was so meaningful for the parents because they would come to me and just say, wow, we just never expected this. We feel so welcome. We feel so part of the family. And the kids beaming with pride. I mean, that was so rewarding for me to see their opposite experience, like rather than feeling rejected, that they're fully celebrated. And one kid I remember, as I was putting up the things on the bulletin board, one little boy came up to me and said, "So, where is the country of Texas?"
My little guy still asks that.
And I said, this is exactly why I do what I do. We need to open everyone's mind to the global community. And it was wonderful being part of that program, starting that program, and then being able to see it continue. And people loved it. Of course, they want to encourage, being tolerant and loving their entire school community. So it's been neat to see that come to fruition. And then also, even in our city, the multicultural presence in the parade was also my idea, because I thought the community parade that happens over Veterans Day, which is coming up.
Right.
It was always a fun parade. It was a community parade, and you'd have high school football teams and the bands. But I was like, how do people that don't come from that kind of culture but live in Frisco, how do they feel also part of the community in the community parade? So I said, what if we had like a multicultural float and we have kids in their traditional clothing, but they're waving an American flag, because we are a melting pot. And that's what is so special about the United States. So we did that. We launched that in I don't remember, I think it might have been 2013. And again, like everyone loved it so much because it looks like a little small world float, all these beautiful,
it's like you're at Epcot.
Yes, exactly. And they're holding the American flag. And as we would walk down, I mean, the veterans were in tears because they felt also seen for the work that they did to secure this beautiful melting pot that we get to live in. So, so that's how I've been able to process it myself, but also change the experience for the next generation.
Well, I think that's so important too, because I think one of the things that we as Americans are terrible about is traveling internationally. We all want to do it, but then we do it like we're Americans, which means, okay, we're going to go to Italy. Well, guess what? We're going to be there for 5 days. We're going to see a different city every day. And we're going to go take pictures of all the things that we should go see.
Yeah.
And we don't take the time to just sit back, relax, and hey, meet some locals, hang out at a restaurant.
Right.
And pick up some of the culture. We try to rush through everything because that's how we're programmed.
I know. Well, your podcast, the Driven Podcast. I mean,
Exactly.
We are very driven people. And in Europe, because I've been able to go to several different places, Ireland and England, and I mean, just Italy, it is a different culture. You sit and enjoy, you take breaks in the middle of the afternoon, you go on long vacations, you put the work aside.
Yeah.
And I think for all of us as busy people, we have to have those mental breaks, whether we're actually leaving the country or not. If we don't do that, we're going to totally burn out, and we won't be putting our best work out there or even our best selves.
Yeah, my wife and I have that discussion occasionally, as do my business coach and I. So let me ask you this. I mean, obviously your childhood had significant impact on defining who you are today. What were some of the traits that you think you developed in going through that huge change, having to learn a completely different language, having to kind of build friendships through that, picking up the violin? What are some of the things that you think that part of your life shaped in you today?
Well, certainly it built in me a resiliency. I learned that I can survive really, really bad things. So, I mean, where I can walk into a room, and to experience that at age 5, to walk into a room, not know anyone, not know anything, and still have to go do that every day. And then eventually it gets better. So I learned that nothing, I can be resilient, but also I learned that things can change, and that you can start to change your environment. It can get better, that it's never just always the same. And that has been a good message for me to take throughout my entire life, is one person can make a difference, and one person can create the ripple that creates more and more change. Eventually I became class president in 8th grade. I was very fully integrated into my junior high school. It was a wonderful experience to be in school. And so that's a big lesson for me, is I'm resilient, but I also can create some change. And you can do that at the city and community level, which is why I'm even involved in city council.
Yeah.
When I moved from Chicago to Frisco in 2004, I was coming from the mecca of arts and culture to what I say, the desert of arts and culture.
But we have football.
I know, right? We have football. We have cheerleading. We have barbecue and nails. But none of those things were actually the things that I was passionate about, So I wanted to see places that I could take my kids, music, dance, theater, all of that we were enjoying in the Chicagoland area. So I realized, okay, here's another instance where I feel like I'm alone and there's nothing here for me. What can I do? And fortunately, I talked to my real estate agent at the time, who is now our current mayor, Jeff Cheney.
Mm-hmm.
And that conversation sparked other conversations. He was able to, introduce me to some folks, and then appointed me to a board where I was able to advocate for a performing arts center and say, hey, Frisco voters, what do you think? Should we have a home, a dedicated place for the arts, just like we do for sports and just like we do for education and for health? How about we create a well-rounded community? And that became my message. So and I was just, hoping and wanting something to change. And now look where we are in 2023, where we're really getting close to potentially having that become a reality. Our city council just approved the consultants to be able to start looking at design, finding a Broadway partner, testing out the land that has been donated at Hall Park by Craig Hall. So by March of 2025, it's a long time to wait, but over 20 years for me, but and others longer, we'll have some answers that the council can finally decide, okay, yes, we're going, or no, we're going to wait. And of course, I hope that we're going.
Sure. Well, you do have a large voice there.
Yes.
So how did you go about, this brand new transplant, one of our new Texans in 2000, did you say
2004.
2004.
Mm-hmm.
How did
and
you
I
go
did not
about
call myself a Texan.
Yeah, I would imagine not. Not
yes,
then.
yeah, I resisted that. Yeah.
So brand new to the Frisco community, how did you go about saying, you know what, I would love to see this here. I know others would.
Yeah.
I know you had the contact with Jeff Cheney, but what made you think that you could actually make a difference and have that contribution?
Well, I'll be honest, it was out of true desperation. So when I first moved, it was November of 2004, and I have such a tight-knit family up in Chicago, and Thanksgiving is a huge deal. Christmas is a huge deal. It turns into a week-long celebration and everybody's sleeping over and all this fun stuff. And I missed it when I came for that first, year in 2004. And I refused to go out of my bathtub. I was in my bathtub listening to Celine Dion, just sobbing, why am I here? I don't want to be here. I miss everybody. What am I doing? We tried to find some things to do in Frisco. There was nothing to do, in my opinion. And then I drove down to Dallas. And even back then, it was not the same Dallas that it is now.
Right.
Now, you've got Clyde Warren Park and the Arts District. It's really amazing what Dallas has become as well. It was not there 20 years ago. So I'm like, what is this place? Am I going to just wither away? And it was true desperation. And finally I realized once again, okay, I could just sit here and whine about it, or I need to just see what I can do. Who can I talk to? And at that time, Jeff was a real estate agent and on council, not at 2004, but we reached out later. And I said, do you know anything? Like, can you help me figure out what do I do? How do I get involved? And because I knew he was on council, and he was so wonderful. I mean, I was just this random citizen. He could have completely ignored me, not taken a meeting, but he welcomed me into his office and said, how can I help you? And that was so meaningful to me, that somebody in our city government was willing to listen and then took me seriously and said, well, if you want, I can help, guide that process for you. And you need to talk to this person, or I can appoint you to a board. You want to commit to doing that. And without people being in your life to help guide that process, I mean, I probably wouldn't. I would just been flailing around in my neighborhood wondering, how am I going to make a difference? But it's asking the question and then trying to find those people that are influential. And hopefully they will take your meeting. And that's really been something that I think about when constituents reach out.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one to me is extremely important. Every single one has a story, and there's a reason they're reaching out. I mean, they could have done anything else with their day, but instead they choose to write an email, sometimes nice, sometimes not. But still, they're reaching out because they have a concern. And to me, that's really important because you're part of the fabric of our community. And I need to know, well, how is it that I can help you? And what do you want to do to contribute to making our Frisco better? So it's been really, really fun to go through that process. I say 90% fun, 10% it is hard.
Absolutely.
Because some people are angry and sometimes justifiably so that they haven't been heard. So you have to just hear them out first, and then, okay, this is what you're dealing with. Let's see, where can we go with that? And that's how you do it. You just have to keep asking questions. You have to keep talking. No one's going to know how to make change if they don't know that you want a change.
Right.
So you've got to advocate. You've got to speak up. And even if you think you're the only one, you probably aren't. There is a community out there, but they aren't speaking up because it needs leadership. So you have to be the leader that you're looking for. And that's really how it came down. Was I just didn't see the leadership. And I think the leadership was actually tired. There was previous leadership and they were just tired. I get it. It's not easy to keep pressing into something when the constant answer seems to be no.
Right.
So you cannot give up either. You can't give up on that first try.
So there's resiliency sneaking back in.
Yes, exactly.
A 20 plus year, or I guess coming up on 20 year
coming
project.
up on 20 years, yeah.
So let me ask you this. This is something that I'm interested in personally.
Mm-hmm.
How do you teach / pass on those lessons in resiliency to your kids who have it easier than you?
Yeah. So I love that question. It's through example. That's one of the ways you can do it. They watch you. Now, my oldest daughter, Ellie, the one who went to Baylor.
Sick and Bears.
Yes, Sick and Bears. She had an idea that she came up with in freshman year of high school, and it was called the Mum Challenge. You know how in Texas you've got these massive mums for homecoming, and I had no idea what the heck this was when we first moved. I'm like, why would anyone do this? So we didn't understand. Now I understand the whole culture behind mums. But in her mind, she's like, Mom, I don't want to buy that. I don't want to have that. I would just rather, instead of spending $300 on a mum, why don't we just get a real flower and then donate some of the money to a charity? I'm like, this is amazing. Let's do that. So, but think about how difficult it would be for a lone freshman to come into a high school with traditions that are, very deep and meaningful for other people on what their mums are. And so she went through a trial of trying to get that idea going, and it actually did get planted and sprout and grow. I mean, for 4 years she did it. She was able to raise $2,500 in her first year for the birthday party project in Dallas, where they give birthday parties to kids that are underserved. And then she gave money to Frisco Fast Packs. I mean, it was really neat. And the principal got involved, and there were always, there were so many different folks that wanted to buy a real flower. They were like, oh, this is a different idea. I'm going to do it. The kids want to do it. The parents want to do it. And then there was also the resistance, where her posters were getting torn down. And even I heard some teachers were kind of running against her. And I was like, honey, this is what happens. Nobody argues with the ice cream truck man because everybody wants what he wants. That's a totally different situation. When you stand up for something, that's how you know you're doing something and you're making some traction as you get opposition. So I'm like, don't give up. That's okay. The opposition is normal and you just need to let it kind of, like a wave, just go over you. And you don't let it stop you. You don't let it make you fall. You're just going to stand there and you're going to keep pushing in. And she did. She did it the entire 4 years. She was very proud of it. And then somebody picked it up after her. So there was a little bit of succession.
A little legacy there.
Yeah. And then I don't know if it's still going because we're not as involved, but I loved that she was able to do that. And I could see that she had grown that resiliency in her. And my other 2 kids, the same thing. My middle one is pursuing musical theater. So difficult to do that.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So difficult. There's so many tough moments as an actress, an actor, where you are told you're not the right person. And you can go home and say, you know what, maybe I just quit. Maybe I don't do this anymore. But she has pushed in and she's done such a great job. She's gotten incredible roles. She's in the right time, honestly, also for Broadway. We're past COVID a bit and the content is changing. Like we said, there's a shift in culture on understanding more stories, different stories on stage. They aren't just your regular Mean Girls or, like Hamilton really flipped the script on what you can do with different nationalities being portraying different actors and roles. So she's coming at a right time for her craft, and I'm excited to see where she goes with that. And then my youngest is a published author now.
Oh, wow. My goodness.
I know. It's amazing because she worked on this project for 4 years. She has always been the most timid of our girls. She had 2 huge shoes to fill, with her oldest and the middle sister. And she's always been the most scared. And so when she started exhibiting signs of anxiety, we're like, okay, honey, you need to write it out, work through your thoughts. It's okay to be anxious, but don't let it kind of be on its own. So she started writing and wrote down how she felt, and it turned into a story. And then that story, she thought, you know what, maybe I need to kind of finish this. And then she got really serious about publishing it in her junior year of high school. So she went through multiple developmental editors. I watched her through that whole process, and I didn't push her. She was doing it herself. She wanted to get to the end, and she saw that goal at the end, which was a book in her hands, out of her mind and into her hands. And she did it. I mean, she got that published. She opened with 500 sales.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
Wow.
So it's on Amazon, and then she applied to be in the Barnes & Noble bookstore at Stonebriar Mall, and she got in, which is it's a difficult process because they vet the books. And so she got featured as a new up and coming author, which is exciting.
What's the name of the book?
It's called The Fearless List.
The Fearless List.
And it's
awesome.
a youth fiction, really meant for like junior high kids. Anyone that might have feelings of like, I'm not enough or I'm scared. And she tells a story of 2 best friends, one that seems like totally fearless and the other one's that's very scared. And the one that is brave challenges her friend to say, well, why don't you write down your fears and let's start going and accomplishing the things on your list. So
as you're reading that as a mom, did that take you back to kindergarten and the things that you went through? Yeah,
it was so neat. And it was her story, it was a little bit of a thread of mine, but it was her story. And actually in her story, her mother is Korean. So I said, I hope everybody doesn't think that is actually me, but it's okay. The mom in her story is very brave. And that's why I said, honey, do you look at me like the mom in this story? Because she couldn't quite understand her mom because of that. She felt like her mom wasn't afraid of anything. And her mom would come, if the bee came into the house, her mom would swat the bee away with no fear. And it amazed her. And she said, well, sometimes I do feel like that. I'm like, wow, I need to make sure that I'm always opening up about the struggle and how I got to where I am now. Because if I don't, then she just sees the victory at the end and thinks, oh, that's all it was. It was that easy. Like your question, how'd you do it? You just got it done. No, there's a lot of struggle, a lot of pain through the process.
And I love that answer. In fact, I was at a conference a few weeks ago and there was a guy speaking. He'll be on the podcast at some point, Clay. And he was talking about the Spartan Death Race that he finished, which is this crazy hard race. And I asked him a very similar question, and he kind of thought about it, and he said, our kids see us just succeed and succeed and succeed, and they don't see us fail. Not that we don't. We just don't necessarily talk about it to them.
Right.
And he said, for my kids, I tell them when I'm doing something hard.
Yep.
I open up and I say, this is really hard for me, but they watch me push and push and push, and they see me fail. And it was just like this light bulb went on.
Yeah.
Because I never talk to my kids about my struggles. I talk to them about grit. I talk to them about being resilient.
Right.
My daughter was in jiu-jitsu, or is in jiu-jitsu, and her very first few tournaments, I mean, she just got slaughtered on the mat. She couldn't do anything against those people, and it was just tears and just wanting to quit. And so we would talk through that. And that was just a light bulb moment for me when Clay said that. And then it's funny that you echo it today.
Yeah.
That, man, you've got to let them inside. You've got to let them see it. I think ultimately you can't develop that resiliency and grit until you go through it yourself.
Right.
But you have those kind of mental assets that you've built up by watching mom go through things, dad go through things, other people go through things, to fall back on and say, hey, if they did it, I can too.
Right. It's so important. And I mean, it was a good lesson for me that even the older ones did see my struggle. She hadn't seen it as much during this whole process with the arts in Frisco specifically. So because she was so much younger, and I guess I didn't realize that gap until I read it in her book. And we had the conversation. But absolutely, we're humans, we actually learn more in the struggle than we do in the victory. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's important that we're always sharing that. And people want to hear it. Like anytime I'm invited to a panel or, there's so many different ways to share your story. And I'm very cognizant that I share the struggle part because most people can resonate with the struggle part. And everyone's on their way to the victory. So, I want to be able to encourage people that you're going to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, it seems like your love for the arts started with that violin. And then how has that become kind of a central core purpose for you? Because, the first time I knew of Tammy was with regard to the arts, the Frisco Arts Foundation. And you were really, really pushing for all of the arts to come and thrive in Frisco. So how did that evolve?
So for me, like I said, music has been my language, my first language. It has been the connector to people. And so I experienced that power, the power of music and the transformative power of the arts at such an early age, internalized it, had no idea that that's what I was experiencing. I just knew that that's something I never wanted to let go. So all the way through, I studied music in college. It was actually a struggle because at first my parents said, no, you cannot study music in college. You're never going to make any money as a musician. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? I guess I'll do journalism. So I started out in the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern. And then the first day I'm walking by the music rooms and I'm like, I can't not do this. I have to do this. So called my parents and we didn't have cell phones at the time. You had to run home and use your actual phone.
Yep.
And I said, I've got to study music. And they said, well, then you're going to have to do a double degree because you cannot just graduate with a music degree from Northwestern. So that's why I did both piano performance and English. But I had that music with me. And truly, at the end of that music degree, I was thinking, what the heck am I going to do with a piano performance degree? Like, why did I do it? But all the lessons that you learn when you learn a piece of music are life lessons. They are life skills. You are taking a huge project on from zero. Like, you know nothing about it. You don't know how to play it. You don't know the fingerings. You don't know the dynamics. You don't know the story. And you have to get it to a performance-ready level where you are being evaluated on it and also probably performing it in front of hundreds of people. So that process, there's so much of your own mind, of harnessing your thoughts and your process. And if you can't do that, you will not get to the finish line. You just can't. And I think about how important that is for any person in any business, any sector. If you're not able to harness and capture your own thoughts and make sure you're focused and make sure you're moving down this path when there are negative things that will will come at you, where the messages will be, you can't do this. It's impossible. You're not doing it right. I'm never going to get it. All those messages will happen. And it doesn't matter if you're practicing piano or if you're a lawyer.
Right.
I'm not going to win this case. It's not going to happen. It's impossible. There's no way. And all of that happens, but you are constantly dealing with it when you're practicing an instrument. And you have to overcome it till the very end. So learning that resiliency, it's a continuous pattern for 4 years. And that is what you're doing. You're training your mind, you're training your thoughts, and you're becoming like the mental jujitsu, like a total expert at your inner thoughts. That's where I think there's so much value in learning an instrument. So much value. And there's, when you're in sports, physical value too of, I mean, look at the Texas Rangers, not stopping, and now we got that win. How amazing! Any form, you just cannot give up. So I learned that though at that level in the music side, and then once I got out and I get into Frisco and I'm trying to figure out what do I do. And starting things, got a community together and said, what can we do? Like, how do we form and coming up with the ideas. And I think in that journey, you have to be comfortable with the unknown. You have to be okay with the ambiguous, because the reality is, and I've done so many different podcasts or panels, and I hear people say, yeah, I don't know what I was doing. And everyone says that. I'm like, wow, you know what? In this world, probably most everyone doesn't know what they're doing. Everyone is coming up with it. And we have to just lean in hard into the things that we know we can do well and continue to just put one foot forward and one in the next and keep going. And then soon you look back and you're like, there was a path here. I just created a path. I just went from here to here. But we didn't know exactly how we did it. We just didn't give up.
Yeah.
So that's my journey of the advocacy in arts. I mean, I had no idea that I'd be on council, ever. Never even thought, that thought never crossed my mind, ever. I just thought I would be the, little mouse on the side saying, hey, this is important for our city, and I'll just, do as much as I can in my little space. And that's what I did, as much as I could, with the people around me and getting funding, creating the foundation, having now hundreds of people interested in the arts, then advocating. It got bigger and bigger, and it became not just me, but like this huge community, which is great. Now I needed to get to the leadership level and say, hey, you need to pay attention, because this is a crowd and crowd votes.
Yes.
And so when a crowd votes, you need to pay attention. And that's why I think it started to seep into the political realm, because I had to talk to leadership now to say, what do you think about this? Is this important to you? And if it's not, why is it not important? Would you be able to say that publicly? So holding our leaders accountable, not thinking that someday I would be the decision maker,
being held accountable.
And being held accountable for it. Yeah.
How many stories did you hear of people, during COVID when they're stuck at home, buying their first guitar, right?
Right.
Learning
Buying their first
things.
piano. Yeah. Learning whatever they could on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how people were connecting. Look at all the musicians that were singing together, all the collabs that came.
Yeah.
Dua Lipa and Elton John. I mean, that was
no
an
one
awesome
saw that
one.
coming.
I know. That was so cool. And then even truly the innovation that came out of that was amazing for the arts, and the arts continues to innovate. I actually, almost in a scary way with the AI. I was just watching a program yesterday about the AI artistry that this guy did, where he wrote a song, he sang it, and he put it into his computer and said, sing it like Adele, and it just came out and it sounded exactly like her. Exactly. So it's almost scary now how much you can do with your creativity and innovation in this new world where AI is taking over.
Yeah, on the legal side of things, at that same conference, we had a futurist come talk to us, and the things that are on the horizon are just shocking. In a scary, but in also a really, really good way too.
It can be used for good.
Yeah.
It can help optimize human performance, but it can also do some really scary things.
All right, so you skipped over a little nugget there that I caught.
Okay.
You mentioned that you went in with the journalism degree, and then you're like, oh, I gotta have a music degree.
Yeah.
And so you double majored. Then you threw in there real quick that your other major wasn't journalism, it was English.
Yeah.
And so how
well, the
does-
reason why
Yeah.
was I was not allowed at Northwestern. I couldn't do the journalism major plus the piano performance. They wouldn't allow it. So I had to do the piano performance plus an English degree. That was the only way that I could do both.
Okay.
And that's why.
But how I don't know if ironic is the right word, but the
yes.
first thing, like your biggest challenge from your very earliest age.
I know.
And now you are a Northwestern degreed practitioner of
Exactly.
English.
Teaching English. And that was my first job out of college. I was
wow.
an English teacher in the public schools. Yeah.
Wow.
7th and 8th grade. I mean, and yes, it was, I never even thought about it that way, but because I love the language. I love how language can communicate and capture and inspire. And that's what I loved about it. And that's what I wanted my kids to be inspired by. And how language forces you also to get your thoughts and figure it out. You know, you have a lot of emotions. And if you don't, like even us having to form the sentences to capture the experience, I have to figure out how to do that. I'm making choices with my words. So are you. I mean, that's a really beautiful process. And that happens through language. So it's just another vehicle, just like music is, a language. So to me, that's why I was doing it. I loved it. I loved how it's used. But I never thought of it as, wow. I never even knew the language when I first, started in school. And now here I am teaching it.
Yeah,
So,
that's
it
an
is
amazing
pretty
story
special.
right there.
Yeah, pretty special.
Okay, so we are running low on time,
Yes.
but I want to ask you, give me your top 2-3 books.
Oh my gosh. The Speed of Trust, Stephen Covey, is an
Yes.
incredible book. I highly recommend it to everyone. The Bible, I have to say that one. And only one more? Eek.
Hey, throw out as many as you like.
So how about this one? I love reading biographies or autobiographies. And so I've read a lot on the presidents. And I'm currently reading one called A Team of Rivals, and it's about Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
So, and I tend to kind of go through books differently just based on the time of life I'm in. So right now I'm working through, being on a council and what does that mean? And what does leadership look like? And so, I'm reading that book and it's really interesting. So, but I also read other things that are not just political.
Right.
What was the recent book that I read that my kids wanted me to read was Crying in H Mart. And that is about a girl who is half Korean and half, I don't think she's German, half something else, but half Caucasian. And it's her story of dealing with her dual identity. And that's exactly what my girls are going through.
Wow.
So I read that. It was a great book. I also read Pachinko, is another great book.
Okay.
A Korean family that goes through generations. It's sort of like The Godfather, except it's a Korean
All right.
narrative. Yeah.
Does it involve the mafia too?
No.
Okay. All right. No mafia.
Kind of like the Korean mob, though.
All right.
Yeah. And it's turned into a Netflix series, so you can watch that.
And what's the name of it?
Pachinko.
Pachinko.
Yeah.
All right. I'm putting that on the list.
Yeah, that was my last huge book that I read. It was like this thick, and
It's like a Ken Follett novel.
Yes, exactly, and that's good. Pillars of the Earth was awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do love reading when I can, and I read most when I'm on a plane because I can have that uninterrupted time, or if I'm on a momcation.
Momcation. I like that.
Which is when I read my Pachinko. I just sat there and read. It was great. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Tammy, thank you so much for being here today. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed it, and thank you everyone for tuning in to the Driven Crowd podcast. We will see you next time.